Every imaging vendor I've met recently says that their AI works everywhere. But most radiologists know that's not how real life plays out. Workflows are different, imaging techniques vary, and what performs well at one site may not yield the same results at another. And that's why my next guest believes that a one-size-fits-all approach to AI in radiology is actually holding the industry back. Dr. Khan Siddiqui is the founder and CEO of HOPPR, and you're going to want to hear what he says about how an AI can be hyper-localized to a specific radiology clinic or department and the benefits that that gives them. Let's get to it. Dr. Siddiqui, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, Colin.
I love your background. It's very garage-esque. I love it.
Yeah,
I'm excited
team
to sit down
doesn't.
with you today. We missed the chance to see each other at the last conference, so I'm glad we're doing this now virtually. I'm excited to talk a little bit about this thing you've built here. You've built something called an AI Foundry. That's a unique name, first of all. And
Mhm.
this AI Foundry is supposed to help developers, researchers, and partners develop AI imaging apps. Um, so, can you talk to us a little bit more about what that is?
Absolutely, Colin. Just to give you some context and background, like why we started this stuff. So, my inner why has always been I like to solve problems that people I love and care about have and create a social impact at the same time. And being a radiologist myself, practiced, for a decade. My spouse being a radiologist and all the friends, I saw all the burnout that is happening. And my academic work was all in machine learning and computer vision. And I thought by this time we would have solved all these problems that we're going to run into using AI to help radiologists. That's how we thought about it. And that just wasn't happening. So we started thinking about like, what do we need to do? Do we go build another app? And like everybody's building apps and everybody's trying to build new products to do AI for one disease at a time. And I fundamentally believe that AI needs to be almost like magic in your existing workflows, existing tool that you're already using, not another app I have to install and look at and get distracted by. So that was kind of the framework how we started to think about what the problem is and how to think about the problem. So, and the other thing we started noticing was, and from a research experience also, that the models that are trained and frozen don't perform the same when they go from site to site because our practice of medicine is so different. It's not just that patient demographics are different, but if I was trained at Hopkins, I would learn to scan patient this way. If I was trained at Stanford, I would learn to scan the patient a different way. And those differences in image acquisition based on either scanner differences or technique differences lead to variability in images, so the model performance is different. And there are a bunch of papers now. Emory just published a paper, other folks have published a paper showing that cleared models don't perform the same way across different sites. So how do you go do that stuff? And then our philosophy became like, first of all, the process needs to be fast, right? It should not take 18 months, 2 years to build a model. Can we do it very quickly? And the second one was, how do we make it so easy that a local site or entity could do it themselves? Or if they're seeing model drift or seeing differences across their different institutions, they could tune it for their particular task. So that was kind of the framework how we started thinking about it. And that led to this idea of AI Foundry, where all the components to build an AI model exist. You come in based on your need, you fine tune an existing pre-trained large scale foundation model with the data that either we provide or you bring your own data in and quickly deploy in an API based approach into your existing application or existing workflow. So you're not replacing what you're using for a clinical workflow. So the Foundry provides all the components and reduces the ideation to deployment, which typically takes 18 months to 2 years, down to weeks.
So is what you have built, this foundry you've built, is it targeted at like end users or is it targeted at like people who are developing the apps, like the vendors, in other words? Like who's the main audience for your foundry?
Our persona when we started was AI app developers and OEMs and med device companies that are trying to get through, it's taking too long to build a model and then get through the FDA. How do we shorten that time frame? But last year, things changed. We started to get enterprises and even with radiology practices approaching us like, hey, we have a specific problem. Nobody has a product for this, but we want to AI enable it and heard that your foundry does that. Like, how can we start doing that stuff?
Huh.
So we had to start thinking about, uh, okay, if that is becomes a persona now, not a clinician, but more of IT
Right.
administration and IT folks that can do basic Python type stuff or basic web services, front end development, but not machine learning PhDs. Can we simplify this process so that even they can do it themselves? So that's what we launched at RSNA, our user interface, low code way of building AI models.
So wow. So you're actually getting like large clinics and actual enterprise, provider organizations who are
Mhm.
interested in taking your AI capabilities
Right.
and building something on it,
Yep.
or addressing a need that they're not seeing from existing vendors in this space.
Exactly.
Wow. And at RSNA, you announced what the chest and mammography. Those are the two that you have. Is that right?
Yeah, we released those last year, and
Oh,
then
okay.
now on the Foundry, they're available in the low code way of doing it. I think what is happening is with the other things happening in outside of healthcare in AI, people are realizing I can use ChatGPT or Gemini to do whatever I want to do in my daily life. Why am I not able to do that in radiology? I think if we had launched this 2 years earlier, it would have been like, what do you mean I build my own AI?
Right.
But
Yeah.
because now it's become such a common practice that people are building their own applications and own way of using it in their daily lives, the notion of maybe I should be able to do the same thing in imaging can also play. I think the thing is like, if somebody wanted to, they could take an open source model, host it themselves, and start deploying it. But then what about security, privacy, governance of that stuff, quality? Like who's ensuring that support services, all of that stuff? Like, how does that happen? Right. So Hopper then provides that entire framework, right? So we're building everything under ISO 13485 quality management system, providing software lifecycle practices, security, privacy, high trust, SOC 2, all of that stuff around that, so that the enterprise can do this. And we had to do that anyway because of all our AI partners who use us, AI app partners who use us, or OEM partners who use us, want all those quality related things enabled, right? So we built it from day one thinking that way, and just now we're making it easier for even enterprises in radiology practice to do it themselves.
Yeah, when I was doing the research for this conversation, and I went to your website, I mean, there's a lot of language on your website around the things you just mentioned, SOC 2 and
Mhm.
ISO certifications, and you know, I will say it's not unique. However, it is interesting that you put so much focus on highlighting that you, as an AI a provider of AI solutions, has gone through and made sure that you're complying with all of these standards. But there were two words on the website that I found very interesting. You talk a lot about traceability and transparency of what Hopper does. First of
Yep.
all, for our audience, can you explain what that means to you, and then why is traceability and transparency important when you were talking about AI?
Yeah. So initially, the requirement for that really comes from when you're submitting to a model through regulatory clearances, either at the FDA or in EU and other places. One of the important component is to understand the data provenance, right? Where did data come from? What data was used? Was it generalized enough? Included, all sorts of demographics. Are there any subpopulation that is being underserved and disenfranchised because of the data selection you did, right? So, how do you do that? Provide data provenance on that aspect of it, and transparency on what is going in. So we ensured that piece of it because it was, as a regulatory requirement, kind of became part of that aspect of it. Um, the other thing aspect of it really is, we want the output of the models and how it performs under the user's control. And the reason is, if you think of it in clinical practice, not all of us radiologists are the same spectrum of accuracy or performance or ROC curve, right? Some of the junior folks can be at a lower spectrum where they're not confident, they're overcalling things. Senior guys are more confident, they're maybe undercalling things. So if you pick a model and with a static, let's say, performance metric, it'll have higher false positive, higher false negative, just based on who the radiologist is using it, right? If a low confidence radiologist who's just out of training 3 months ago is using it, he's already calling it overcalling things, and now you have a model that also is overcalling it. You just made the problem worse now. And there's some papers come in and talk about that stuff, right? That AI is helping more senior rads, not junior rads, and that phenomenon is because we are all on different spectrums. So a static model performs that way. But by giving that control and transparency to the end user, they can decide the threshold for their practice. What is the optimal threshold where we would call something positive or negative, and not worry about the something defined by somebody else. And so then and they can change it, right? So what happens in clinical practices where we call about model drift is people learn how AI is performing, and like, oh yeah, it calls this false all the time, or it calls this normal all the time, and you learn and you start changing it, and then model output starts to perform differently because you are treating it differently, and you've changed your behavior because of that reason. But then they have no way to modify the model. Whereas in our scenario, they have the control of they can change it as the practice pattern is changing.
I want to touch on two things that you've
Mhm.
mentioned. So first, I want to go back and just ask you about the underlying data, because you mentioned that, you know, provenance of data, making sure that the data is representative.
Mhm.
How representative, in your opinion, is the data that you're using, but then in general in the industry? Like, because I keep hearing things where the data is a black box. We don't know, does it factor in gender? Does it factor in social,
Mhm.
economic, age representation, um, ethnicity and those kinds of things? Because we know that maybe not so much in radiology, but in certainly other parts of medicine,
Yep,
that can play a huge difference, makes a huge difference. So
absolutely.
so how confident are you that your data is representative across those types of dimensions? And then in general, is this a problem in AI in healthcare, or is this no, it actually is pretty representative out there?
No, it is a problem in AI in healthcare. I'll start with
Okay.
that. That's why we are very deliberate in how we do data. So we spend almost 3 years with our data partners to do data contracts. So we directly partnered with health systems, radiology practices. And the way we did it was we became their service providers to do the de-identification of the data and ensure data privacy, security, and everything aspect of it, right? Not only that, but we also ensured that the sites that are trying to share the data have the rights to be able to do that. They have patient consent. Do they have, right contracts? Do they have secondary use rights of this patient has been disclosed? And we did, there were places where we did not go with them because of how their contracts were or how their patient consents were set up. So we spent a lot of time trying to understand that aspect of it. And because we do the de-identification, then we understand the demographics aspect of it, of the patient, and we can generalize it. And our goal was it has to be representing the national demographic mixture, but also because our ability to fine tune, you could actually fine tune with your local data sets. Let's say if you're in Arizona, there's a lot more, certain type of population there, or certain disease pattern is more, you could actually fine tune for local data for the model generalizable locally also. So we did use representative data for our base training model across
Mhm.
the US. And then we allowed that fine tuning for local generalizability also, all the way down to the clinic level if needed.
Yeah, and that actually that was the second question I was going to ask you. So, you know, it sounds like your AI models can be changed, can be updated, data can
Mhm.
be refreshed, both by you and is it true by your customers? Can they
Correct.
kind of say, "Hey, listen, I really want to take the data that I'm using here locally, and can you add this to, or they can add it into and change
Yep.
the model essentially?" Is that,
Yep.
did I get that
That is
right?
absolutely correct, right? We give them all the tools needed for them to bring their own data and do their own training.
And this goes back to something you mentioned at the start, which is this then can account for the differences in imaging technique, but also local population, local community.
Correct.
The model
Local
can take.
disease prevalences, local population, demographic differences, locals, image acquisition difference practices, things, all of that aspect of it.
I get it. I'm starting to see why perhaps these organizations are excited to partner with Hopper. Um, so to go there for a minute, like you're obviously getting a lot of calls from
Mhm.
clinics, from providers, also from vendors. If you take a step back for a moment, Dr. Siddiqui, is there something you're seeing that these customers of yours are asking you for, are implementing you for, that's got you excited? Are they kind of putting AI into very unique and interesting areas from your perspective?
Yeah, it's so interesting, especially once the clinicians have started to call and the things they're doing, because the problems are unique and they're local problems that as a vendor, you would not think of building a product for that, right?
Okay.
Because there'll be market of N of one, for example, right? So I'll give you one example.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you give me an example? I'm curious.
Yeah. So there's a practice that had, shortage of certain type of radiologists. And because of shortage overall, they had to outsource reading of that particular type of studies through Telerad or through locums like that. And what they were realizing is that they were paying more to the Telerad group than the reimbursement for the particular study, right? And so they were like, I'd rather only do the critical version of the study to be read in the middle of the night or on weekends, but my rads can read it later if they're not critical, right? So that I'm not losing money on all these normal type of studies that are going at night. So they wanted this model to just identify this critical thing that they think is critical,
Gotcha.
right? And they were the only one who wanted that. And then they had the ability to do and fine tuning and deploy that aspects of it and saves tremendous amount of money and optimize their workflow accordingly, right? So that's one example of how somebody can use it. And there are interesting ways to do it, but because of confidentiality, I can't talk about it. But there are some very interesting ways people have used it. I'll give one more example. There's a site that, because of again same issues, academic site that didn't have enough radiologists. So on the weekends and nights, the residents are mostly covering. The issue was the residents on call were missing intertracheal tube location on chest X-rays at night, and they had a lot of problems with patients getting intubated in the wrong side and or having complication in the ICU, things like that. So they wanted to can we help these residents provide immediate feedback by a model that can quickly detect if the ET tube is in the wrong location, right? So they had the ability to think about scenarios like that, they're the unique ones that have that. I'm sure other people have the same problems, but they're so acute, they can't have 24/7 attending radiologists available.
Wow. Again, just to paraphrase what you've just said there, the fact that they're able to take your solution and really tune it to solve their specific problem, it allows them to essentially build a product of an N of one, which you wouldn't be able to do if you came up with an app, because
Exactly.
it's very unlikely that anything more than one or two of these organizations would have that exact same problem.
That's exactly right.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
I
All
mean,
right.
think of it this way, right? The way you use any of the consumer AI products,
Mhm.
it's not the same how other people use it or I use it, right? We all have unique way of using it. I think that what is happening is the same kind of abilities now are getting available to enterprises.
Mm. Okay. So let me ask this final question of you. If I was a clinician, if I was one of these organizations, and I'm looking at or I may have bought a commercial off-the-shelf solution that has some AI baked into it for imaging, right? And I'm sure it's doing its job well. I mean, I think most products do pretty well.
Mhm.
What are the signs that you would tell me to look for in my own workflow, in my own practice, that maybe a sign that I need to augment what I have with something that you're able to provide? Like what are the symptoms that I might go, oh, you know what? Maybe I need what Hopper provides.
Yeah, so a few ways to think about it, right? Number one is the existing model missing things that you've noticed, right? So like, okay, fine, I can have wait for the vendor's next version to come out, or can I go and just do the same thing and address that stuff? The other one is maybe I'll give you an example, right? Let's say there's a model for chest X-ray that detects pneumothorax automatically, rib fractures automatically, and is working great. But in your practice, you also worry about certain type of pneumonia, or you worry about air in the mediastinum, and not just pneumothorax type of thing, right? And then vendor or no vendor has a product around that, but you do care about those as a critical finding. So you can actually supplement that with things that the commercially available vendor doesn't do, and you can train models for those particular findings yourself and to supplement that aspect of it.
Very cool. All right. Well, then, super final question for you, then, Dr. Siddiqui. Really appreciate everything you shared, but where can people go to learn more about your organization?
Yeah, they can go to www.hopper, spelled as HOPPR.ai. And if you need anybody from our team to come, just fill in the contact form and we'll reach out. Or
Awesome.
I'm available on LinkedIn too, and I respond pretty well.
I was going to say your LinkedIn profile is right there on the screen, so anybody wanting
Yeah.
to connect with you can certainly do so on LinkedIn. Um, but Dr. Siddiqui, thank you so much for being on our program today. You've shared a lot of great information and really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you, Cole.
I was fascinated by Dr. Siddiqui's comments about how their AI Foundry can be adapted to the specific needs of an individual radiology clinic or a vendor or an entire provider organization. I especially loved how he reframed the challenge of AI in healthcare. Instead of asking whether a model works in general for healthcare, he asked, does it work here? Dr. Siddiqui recognized that workflows, patients, and organizations are all different, so why can't their AI tools be tuned to that difference? Maybe next time we'll get a HOPPR customer on here to give us a detailed breakdown of how they're using that technology. And hey, if you made it this far in the video, we'd really appreciate your help by mashing that like button, clicking subscribe, or writing a nice comment below. Also, head over to healthcareittoday.com where you can find more great content like this. I'm Colin Hung. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.